Distractions, brought to you by the Nerdpocalypse podcast. I'm your host, Jay. All right, guys, I'm back. Let's talk about Last Night in Soho. This is Edgar Wright's new movie, written and directed by him. I'll read you the log line, and then I'll get into it. So the premise is Eloise, or Ellie, a young woman with a passion for fashion design and a strange sixth sense, finds herself transported back in time to 1966 London in the body of an iconic nightclub singer of that era named Sandy. While in Sandy's body, Ellie begins a romantic relationship, but she begins to realize that Sandy's life in the swinging 60s is not as glamorous as it appears to be, and both past and present begin to fall apart with horrifying consequences. So this is starring Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy, Matt Smith, and Terrence Stamp. So, one, if you're thinking about Edgar Wright films and you're looking for more like the Cornetto trilogy type of film, it's nothing like that, right? This is far more serious in nature. Look, I'm not going to give away because this movie has a lot of twists and turns and very heavily spoilery things. So I don't want to give away too much. I'll just leave you with that premise. But what I would say is it borders somewhere between thriller and horror as far as the genre of this film. It's not like a full-on horror movie, but it certainly has some of those kind of elements to it. But Edgar Wright's style really comes through with, like, you know, especially the music having a huge effect on the film, much like Baby Driver did. The sort of swinging 60s soundtrack is really dope. Like, it really super works. What I would say is, don't let people spoil this one for you. Like, really try to stay as spoiler free as you can if you do plan on seeing this. But yeah, Edgar Wright is back, and he's doing it in absolute his style and his fashion. There is nothing about this movie that is particularly light, which is interesting for him. Where Baby Driver is like a fun, like, you know, balls to the wall action movie in a lot of ways with cool music. This one has an overall message about sort of the connection between women of the 1960s with the modern woman, right? There is so much to be said about how different their lives are because of the times, but how intrinsically connected they are, right? It has one of the better endings as far as how these characters interact, like how sort of good guys and bad guys interact with each other, and it sort of subverts your expectations as to what those characters, it's really hard for me to discuss this without spoiling it, what those characters mean to the overall, like, to the overall world, right? But it has some like Edgar Allan Poe-ish type feel to it in a lot of ways, which, if you've ever read any Poe stuff, like after watching it, you'll kind of be like, yeah, that makes sense. It's a really good story commenting on how women are seen in society. And if you're immediately like, oh, it's a woke movie or whatever silly nonsensical perspective you think that is, it's not. It's actually telling an interesting story, and you should probably pay attention to the messaging. It is not, again, this is not Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead. This is Edgar Wright really flexing to show you, like, yeah, I have a style, yeah, I can do fun and action, but I can also do very serious things. But all the while being very kind of spooky and creepy, like, version of London in the modern and in the 60s era. It's great. Look, Thomasin McKenzie is really good as Ellie, as a sort of like naive country mouse girl who goes to London, but she's there for go to fashion school, but she's not quite sure of herself because she's been raised by her grandmother, which is why she has this like love for 60s music. But then when she sort of embodies this character Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who is like very sexy, very like city girl type of thing. It's, you know, country mouse, city mouse kind of story. She gets to kind of live vicariously through Sandy, and then things just, they go in places that you wouldn't have expected. It's really awesome to see Terrence Stamp in anything. Like, I always love seeing Terrence Stamp and stuff. And he plays his role as a sort of local barfly very well. Like, he's super good. But the two leads, Taylor Joy and Mackenzie, are fantastic, and their stories are equally as interesting, on both sides of the story, right? Like, on both sides of the mirror, so to speak. And Matt Smith is great. His character exists in the sort of the 60s era, but his character is interesting. Like, there's more to his character than I thought when he's first introduced. So everybody's really great. It's a great mystery. Again, please don't let people spoil this for you. Just go and see it. Especially if you are a fan of Edgar Wright and you're a fan of things that are like in this sort of thriller horror sort of mid-ground, and you're looking for something that has meaning, right? Like, a lot of these great horror movies as of late actually have some social commentary, and this one is very similar to that. And I think that's what makes it not just like, ooh, jump scares, but actually makes it into a really quality film. Look, I'm a huge fan of Edgar Wright, so I was incredibly pleased to see him try something different and touch into a genre that he hasn't done before. Look, this is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. Last Night in Soho, it's a must-see, and we'll see you guys next time.